you remember when Christmas mornings glowed brighter, when every toy felt like a treasure, and the world seemed simpler? This is the story of those Christmases. The 1970s way. If you grew up in America during the early 1970s, Christmas still carried that old-fashioned glow. The scent of pine needles, the warmth of a wood-paneled living room, and the hum of vinyl spinning on a console stereo. But the world around us was shifting. The 1960s had left behind their energy, and the new decade brought something quieter, more personal, a kind of cozy optimism. Families were smaller, cars were boxier, and the presents under the tree were changing with the times. The heart of Christmas still began with the Sears Wish book. Every kid in the neighborhood knew when it arrived. You'd find it lying on the coffee table, its glossy cover showing a family in matching sweaters beside a perfectly decorated tree. Inside were dreams. Barbie's new Malibu house, Lionel trains looping through snow-dusted villages, Tonka trucks gleaming like real steel. We circled the things we wanted with a red pen, as though Santa himself might be watching through the pages. That catalog was magic. You could flip from page to page and feel the pulse of an entire decade. Dolls with long hair and suntanned skin, slot cars that zipped through plastic racetracks, and board games that promised laughter long into the night. For boys, there were cap pistols, walkie-talkies, and model kits, tanks, planes, and rockets. For girls, the Barbie dream house had finally turned pastel and modern with shag rugs and sliding doors. It looked like something right out of a California commercial, and it made the living room floor feel like Malibu itself. Every Christmas tree in those years had a particular glow. Not LED brightness, but the warm pulse of colored bulbs that blinked in rhythm. We still had tinsel, the kind that clung to sweaters and cats alike, and ornaments that had survived from the 50s. Glass balls painted with fading glitter, angels with felt wings. The tree skirt was dotted with toys that came alive the moment you looked at them. Chatty Cathy still talking, easy bake ovens glowing faintly under a pink bulb, and etch-a-sketches waiting for the next masterpiece. For many of us, Christmas morning started with that first crack of dawn, creeping down shag-carpeted stairs to see what Santa had left. The smell of coffee mixed with cinnamon rolls, and the faint static of the TV as the local channel aired the Yule log. There were no smartphones, no screens buzzing, just the glow of the tree and the anticipation that seemed to fill the entire room. And the gifts. Oh, the gifts. There was something tactile about toys in the early 70s, something you could hold, wind up, and feel. The Easy Bake Oven made cupcakes that were barely edible but absolutely magical. Rock'em Sock'em robots clashed in plastic fury on kitchen tables. Viewmasters clicked through worlds of color, Disney, nature, space, all seen through that little red viewer that made reality feel secondary. Every boy dreamed of Hot Wheels supersets. Those orange plastic tracks looped around the living room, down furniture and under chairs, cars flying fast enough to chip the paint. There were no batteries, just gravity, imagination, and the occasional push from a kid who wanted his car to win. And then there was the big wheel. You could hear it from down the street. The sound of that hard plastic front wheel scraping pavement, the laughter of a kid spinning out at the corner. It was pure freedom, the suburban version of a motorcycle, bright and unbreakable. By the early 1970s, TV commercials had become part of the holiday ritual. The jingles stuck in your head like candy canes. You'll shoot your eye out. It's Mattel. It's swell. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Each ad made you want everything, and somehow the commercials themselves felt like part of the celebration. They played between A Charlie Brown Christmas and Frosty the Snowman, making those December evenings feel endless. Music filled every room. The Carpenters' Merry Christmas, Darling, John Denver's Aspen Glow, and Bing Crosby's White Christmas on scratchy LPs spun beneath needles that popped and hissed. There was a moment before opening gifts when everyone would just sit, coffee cups steaming, lights flickering, and listen. It was as if the world paused to remember how beautiful it could be. Parents still gave practical gifts back then. New pajamas, socks, or winter coats. But they always tucked something special under the tree. Maybe a new transistor radio, small enough to fit in your pocket, where you could listen to baseball games and Casey Kasem's American Top 40. Or maybe a Polaroid camera, where instant photos came out in your hand like pieces of magic. Some families had begun to embrace new technology. Color TVs were becoming more common, and for many of us, one appeared as the family gift of the year. You'd sit cross-legged on the carpet and watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in color for the first time. The reds glowing richer than you'd ever imagined. It was the future wrapped in tinsel. But the magic of Christmas in the early 1970s wasn't just about the gadgets. It was about being together, about the smell of pine needles on the carpet, about Dad assembling toys with a screwdriver while Mom passed around pie, about the way wrapping paper piled up in colorful drifts around the room. The house always looked a little wild by mid-morning, and that was part of the charm. There was laughter, camera flashes, maybe even a small argument over batteries. But beneath it all was that quiet, steady joy. Those years felt like the bridge between eras, when toys were still built to last, when Christmas cards were written by hand, and when you could still hear the faint jingle of a Salvation Army bell through the crisp December air. The gifts might have been plastic and simple, but the feeling, that rush of wonder, was as real as it gets. By the time the late 1970s rolled around, Christmas had changed, not in spirit, but in color, in sound, in sparkle. The world had gone brighter, louder, and just a little flashier. The trees now shimmered with blinking multicolored bulbs, silver garlands, and those big C9 lights that buzzed faintly when you got too close. Families had shag carpets, avocado-colored kitchens, and stereo consoles that doubled as furniture. The air smelled like cinnamon and pine, but also something new, the plastic tang of freshly unboxed electronics. And oh, the gifts. If the early part of the decade belonged to dolls and race cars, the late 70s belonged to imagination. The toy aisles exploded with ideas that felt futuristic. In 1977, Star Wars hit theaters, and by Christmas that year, it had taken over every living room in America. Every kid wanted Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, small plastic figures that brought an entire galaxy to the foot of the Christmas tree. Parents camped outside toy stores for them. They were impossible to find, and for many kids, just holding one felt like owning a piece of the stars. Hot Wheels were still around, but now they had superchargers and loop tracks, complete with motorized boosters that flung cars faster than ever. Barbie had traded her suburban home for a Malibu townhouse, and G.I. Joe, once a soldier, was now an adventurer exploring jungles and deserts. Even toys reflected the mood of the decade. Less about war, more about exploration and fun. Then came the rise of electronic toys. The first time you heard the beep of Simon, that glowing, colorful memory game, it sounded like the future had arrived. You'd sit cross-legged on the carpet, pressing colored pads, following the light pattern until your head spun and your laughter filled the room. Mattel's electronic football became the obsession of boys everywhere. Tiny red LED blips on a black screen. It looked nothing like football, but somehow it felt like it. Board games were everywhere too. Operation, Life, Clue, Battleship, and families played them for hours. The game pieces would scatter under the couch, the spinner would jam, but nobody cared. There was something wholesome about the way everyone leaned in together, sharing snacks, teasing each other, and laughing until someone accused Dad of cheating. Girls had their own treasures, easy bake ovens still humming softly, baby alive dolls that could eat and drink, and light bright, where glowing pegs turned black paper into starscapes of imagination. And, of course, there was Barbie's dream house, now with elevators and sun decks, a monument to pastel perfection. One of the most unforgettable arrivals of the decade was the Atari. Before it, games were physical. After it, they were electric. Pong was mesmerizing. 2 white paddles, 1 dot, endless hours of laughter. By the late 70s, Atari had become the crown jewel under many trees, the ultimate family gift that promised entire worlds on your television screen. It was the beginning of something new, and we all felt it, even if we didn't understand it yet. Commercials reflected the decade's energy. Colorful, fast-paced, full of jingle bells and disco beats. You'd see children in turtlenecks playing Stretch Armstrong, pulling him across the screen like he was made of magic rubber. You'd see smiling parents with cameras around their necks. Kodak Instamatics capturing the glow of family rooms filled with toys. The ads promised joy, and somehow they delivered. And there were those small, perfect gifts, stocking stuffers that still live in memory, Rubik's Cubes, Matchbox cars, Pez dispensers, plastic snow globes, and candy canes that seemed to last all day. Each one had its own tiny thrill, its own place in the mosaic of the morning. As the decade drew to a close, even the wrapping paper reflected the times. Brighter colors, bolder fonts, shiny foil that sparkled under the lights. Families had Super 8 film cameras now capturing Christmas mornings that still flickered today on grainy home movies. Children laughing, paper flying, the soft hum of the heater and the crackle of a record spinning in the background. Christmas dinners smelled the same, turkey, gravy, pie, but now they were served on tables with harvest gold dishes and macrame runners. The laughter, though, never changed. It echoed through those split-level homes, across driveways and down snowy streets where kids still built forts and rode sleds until their faces stung. By the end of the 1970s, the meaning of Christmas hadn't vanished. It had evolved. It was brighter, noisier, more commercial perhaps, but still filled with love. The gifts had become symbols of imagination, connection, and progress. The transistor radios of the 60s replaced by Ataris and Simon games, but the feeling behind them unchanged. When I think back to those Christmas mornings, what I remember most isn't the gifts themselves, but the feeling That pulse of excitement as dawn crept through frosted windows, that rush of joy as you tore open the paper, that sense that the world was safe, warm, and full of possibility. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have instant everything, but we had wonder. And that wonder, that electric feeling of seeing your name on a tag beneath the tree, that's something no decade has ever replaced. Christmas in the 1970s was more than presents. It was color. It was sound. It was imagination unboxed. And for those of us who lived it, it still glows like the blinking lights of a tree in the corner of memory, forever shining, forever warm.